She laughed. "What, you think you're some kind of catch?" When I said I deserved better, and watching me replace her was the revenge she never saw coming. Her laughter is something I will never forget. It wasn't just a laugh, it was sharp, cruel, and soaked in arrogance. I had looked her in the eyes that night and told her simply, quietly, that I deserved better. Better than the constant jabs, better than the belittling, better than being made to feel like I wasn't enough. I thought, maybe, just maybe, those words would spark a real conversation, a moment of honesty. Instead, she threw her head back and laughed in my face. "What, you think you're some kind of catch?" she said, her lips curling into a smirk that cut me deeper than any knife. The room went silent after that. I sat there frozen, my chest tight, my hands trembling, not from rage, but from the sting of humiliation. That smirk of hers. It wasn't the first time I'd seen it, but this time it landed differently. It was the smirk of someone who thought she had me figured out, who thought I was too weak, too desperate, too invested to ever walk away. She leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, eyes glinting with mockery. She wanted me to explode, to shout, to prove her right. She wanted me to crumble under the weight of her disrespect so she could twist the story and tell people how sensitive or dramatic I was. She thought her laughter would break me, but in that moment, something inside me shifted. I didn't shout. I didn't beg. I didn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me shattered. Instead, I swallowed the hurt. I let the silence hang heavy in the room. My face stayed calm, my voice low when I said, "You'll see." That was the exact moment the old me died. The version of me who tolerated the jokes at my expense, who brushed off the cutting remarks, who convinced himself that love meant enduring humiliation. That man ended the moment she laughed in my face. What was born in his place was colder, sharper, stronger. I sat across from her, nodding as though her words hadn't just crushed me. On the surface I looked calm, but inside my mind was spinning. Her laughter wasn't just cruelty, it was clarity. It showed me exactly where I stood in her eyes. Not as a partner, not as someone she respected, not as a man worth protecting. In her eyes I was nothing more than a convenience she could mock whenever she wanted. And I decided, then and there, that I would never allow myself to be looked at that way again. The seed of revenge planted itself quietly in my chest that night. Not revenge through shouting or bitterness, but through something far more powerful, rebuilding myself, reclaiming my dignity, and showing her what happens when the man she underestimated finally decides he's done. She thought she had won when she laughed at me. She had no idea that her laughter was the spark that lit the fire that would eventually burn her entire illusion to the ground. Looking back, I realize her laughter wasn't a sudden cruelty. It was the final strike in a pattern I had been ignoring for far too long. That moment where she smirked and asked if I really thought I was some kind of catch only hurt so deeply because it carried the weight of every red flag I had brushed aside, every warning I had silenced in the name of love. The signs were always there. She had a way of belittling me, not always in explosive arguments, but in those subtle, cutting remarks that seemed disguised as jokes. Whenever I did something kind for her, like cooking dinner after a long day or fixing something around her apartment, she would shrug and say, "Don't expect a medal." If I tried to share my dreams or plans, she'd roll her eyes and say, "We'll see if that actually happens." Little by little, her words chipped away at me, until I started doubting myself without even realizing it. And then, there were the sarcastic jokes she made in front of her friends. I remember nights out where she would make me the punchline, pointing out flaws that should have been kept between us, like the way I dressed or how I mispronounced a word. Her friends would laugh, and she would laugh the loudest, all while glancing at me with that same smirk that told me she enjoyed making me small. I laughed along too sometimes because I thought maybe that's what couples do, tease each other. But it wasn't teasing. It was disrespect dressed up as humor, and I let it slide because I didn't want to seem overly sensitive. She compared me to other men too, never directly enough to start a fight, but just enough to sting. "Look at how ambitious he is," she'd say when a friend got a promotion. "Why can't you be more like him?" Or she'd scroll through social media, sighing at pictures of celebrities or influencers, muttering about how she deserved a life like that. Each comparison was like a pinprick, small on its own but relentless over time, until I was left bleeding invisibly, still trying to hold us together. And through it all, I gave. God, I gave more than I had. I worked extra shifts to cover expenses, made sacrifices to support her goals, bit my tongue when she crossed lines because I thought patience would eventually win her respect. I put her happiness before mine, time and time again, convincing myself that love meant selflessness, even when it came at the cost of my own dignity. But that's the heartbreak, isn't it? Realizing that while you were giving everything, your time, your effort, your loyalty, the other person wasn't even treating you like a partner. To her, I wasn't someone to cherish. I was someone to use when it was convenient and mock when it wasn't. That's why her laughter cut so deep that night. It wasn't just about the words she said. It was the echo of every moment I had swallowed my pride. Every time I had convinced myself her jokes weren't that cruel, every sacrifice I had made that went unnoticed. Her laughter was the last straw, the undeniable proof that in her eyes I had never been a partner. I had only ever been a target. After that night, something inside me hardened. I didn't make a dramatic speech or storm out the door. I didn't shout about how ungrateful she was or demand that she see my worth. Instead, I chose something much quieter, much more powerful. I stopped begging for her respect. For so long, I had poured my time, my energy, and my heart into convincing her I was enough. I thought if I tried harder, if I gave more, if I swallowed my pride and stayed patient, eventually she'd look at me differently. But that laugh, the way she smirked when she asked if I thought I was some kind of catch, made me realize that nothing I gave her would ever be enough. Not because I wasn't enough, but because she never wanted me to be. So I started pulling back. Subtly at first, so she wouldn't notice. I stopped being the first to text her good morning. I stopped rearranging my schedule to fit hers. I stopped bending myself into knots just to avoid conflict. I started saying no when I needed to, and the strangest thing happened. My world didn't collapse. Instead, my world got bigger. I reconnected with friends I had drifted away from, the ones she always said were a waste of time. I poured myself into my work, staying late because I wanted to, not because I had to. I picked up hobbies I had abandoned, rediscovering parts of myself I had forgotten existed. Piece by piece, I was taking myself back, and she noticed. At first, her texts were the same. Short, dismissive, laced with sarcasm. But as my replies grew slower, shorter, less invested, her tone shifted. Suddenly, she was asking why I was so cold. She wanted to know why I didn't seem as eager, why I wasn't chasing after her like before. The woman who once mocked me for being too available now seemed unsettled by my silence. It was almost surreal watching the shift in power. For years, I had been the one on edge, waiting for scraps of affection, begging for her attention. Now it was her reaching out, her voice laced with insecurity, her messages dripping with questions she never used to ask. And I didn't gloat. I didn't throw her words back at her. I just let the silence speak for me. Because silence unnerved her more than any argument ever could. Silence forced her to face the cracks in the foundation she thought was unshakable. Silence showed her that I no longer needed her approval, no longer hung on every word, no longer cared to fight for a respect she had already denied me. Behind the scenes, I was planning. Planning a clean break. Planning a life without her in it. Planning to walk away not broken, but stronger. Because the truth was simple. The man she mocked, the man she laughed at, was already gone. What was left in his place was someone colder, sharper, and stronger. Someone who no longer needed her to see his worth. And that was the sweetest part. She thought her laughter had crushed me, but all it really did was set me free. The turning point came quietly, almost unexpectedly. I wasn't even looking for someone new. I had been so wrapped up in pulling myself out of the shadow of her cruelty that I didn't think love, or even companionship, was on the horizon. But then I met someone different. Someone kind, someone genuine. Someone who, in the simplest of ways, reminded me that love wasn't supposed to feel like suffocation. It wasn't some grand, sweeping romance at first. It was subtle. A conversation that didn't feel like a battle. A smile that wasn't laced with sarcasm. A voice that didn't cut, but soothed. I remember the first time she asked me how my day was, and actually listened to the answer. That small detail hit me harder than anything, because I realized how long it had been since I'd felt truly heard. The difference was staggering. With her, there were no games, no backhanded comments, no mocking smirks. She didn't make me feel like I had to prove my worth every single day. She didn't measure me against some invisible bar I could never reach. With her, being myself was enough, and that felt like fresh air after years of drowning. Meanwhile, my ex was watching from the sidelines. At first, she didn't believe it. She thought my silence was just another phase, a trick to win back her approval. But when she realized that I wasn't circling back, when she saw that I was actually moving on with someone else, the arrogance she had worn so proudly began to crack. Her texts shifted again. No more sarcasm, no more dismissive jokes. Instead, they were filled with praise and apologies. She suddenly remembered all the things I had done for her, all the ways I had been there when no one else was. She started telling me how strong I was, how much she valued me, how she was willing to change, but I couldn't forget. I couldn't forget the way she laughed in my face when I said I deserved better. I couldn't forget how she made me the punchline in front of her friends, how she compared me to other men, how she smirked when she thought I'd never leave. Those memories weren't scars, they were lessons, and I wasn't about to throw them away for empty promises, so I stayed firm. I didn't lash out at her, didn't rub my happiness in her face. I didn't need to. My silence and my actions were enough. She saw the way I smiled differently now. She saw the way my new partner looked at me with genuine affection, not condescension. And that was the revenge, not loud, not cruel, but undeniable. Because the real punishment for her arrogance wasn't losing me. It was watching me thrive with someone else, watching me live the life she never thought I was capable of without her. Watching me be happy, respected, and valued in a way she never gave me. Her laughter had once been the sound of my humiliation. But now her silence as she watched me move on was the sound of my victory. The final act came like I always knew it would, with her reaching out one last time. The tone of her messages shifted again, but this time it wasn't mocking or apologetic. It was laced with fury and desperation. She accused me of moving on too quickly, of replacing her like she had never mattered. Her words spilled out in anger. Wow, so that's it? After everything, You just found someone else? You didn't even fight for me. You didn't even give me a chance to prove I could change." I read them in silence, a strange calm washing over me. Once upon a time, those words would have gutted me. They would have sent me spiraling, desperate to explain myself, desperate to prove that I had always been loyal, always been giving. But not anymore. When she finally called, her voice cracked between rage and tears. "You really think you're better off without me? You think she's better than me? You're not a catch, you never were, and you'll realize that when she leaves you too." I almost laughed then, not out of cruelty, but because her words rang hollow. The same woman who once smirked at me, mocking me for believing I deserved better, was now terrified because she realized I had actually found it. I let her vent, let her scream, let her accuse me of betrayal I had never committed. And when the silence fell on the line, I finally spoke, calm and steady. "Do you remember that night? The night you laughed in my face and told me I wasn't a catch? You were wrong. You just weren't the one to see it." There was nothing left for her to say after that. She tried to stammer out a reply, but I ended the call before she could find the words. That was my closure. Not the screaming, not the begging, not the false apologies, just the quiet truth, spoken plainly. Walking away had been the hardest decision I'd ever made, but it was also the one that set me free. For so long, I thought leaving her would destroy me. Instead, it rebuilt me. I had my dignity again, my self-worth, my peace. I didn't wake up every day wondering if I was enough. I didn't live in the shadow of her smirk, waiting for the next cruel remark. Now, my life looked different. I surrounded myself with people who valued me, who respected me, who didn't see me as a punchline. My new relationship wasn't perfect. It was real. And that was all I ever wanted, to be seen, to be heard, to be loved without condition. Her laughter had once been the loudest sound in my life, drowning out every effort I made. But now, the silence that followed her absence was louder, stronger, better. Betrayal and disrespect cut deep. They leave scars. But the sweetest revenge isn't shouting or proving yourself to the one who doubted you. It's thriving without them. It's letting your life become the answer to every cruel word they ever spoke. And watching me replace her. Watching me live the happiness she thought I'd never find. That was the revenge she never saw coming. But it was also the ending I always deserved.